performance differences. So it's maybe worth checking out. I honestly don't remember what the best one was.
And you looked really good in a Tyvek suit.
Oh my God, that was so awful, Colin. It was so impossibly hot. What no one tells you about this stuff is when it's curing, it gives off a ton of heat. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding video producer Colin Russell.
Hey there.
FineHomebuilding.com editor Rob Watzak.
Hey everyone.
And Fine Homebuilding producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. All right. Well, now that we got that out of the way, it's good to see you guys.
Good to see you,
Patrick.
Boy, Colin, it's been a while since you've been on the show. It's always a pleasure. Last time I heard you were tearing your stairs apart and your
My
bathroom.
bath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. You know, you've probably heard like the last person you want to marry is a carpenter because your house is never finished. Now, I can't speak for all carpenters, but my wife experiences this. So yeah, I moved on from the stair kitchen remodel to completely gutting the bathroom.
Is it done?
And it's gutted, and that's where it stopped.
Oh, good.
Just because I've gotten busy with other things. But this weekend, I'm jumping back in.
So what are you doing with one less bathroom? That's got to be complicating to life.
Well, luckily, I have an outdoor shower. So I live outside, and my wife and daughter share the other bathroom.
Okay. Wow. So are they getting impatient, or are they playing it cool?
They're playing it cool. You know, there's just a lot of challenges once I opened it up. You know, it's like I want everything plumb level and square. The house was built in 1910. There's an overhang. There's a lot of the framing is 2x6, 24 on center for my floor joists, and they're all out of whack. So I'm going to be bringing in some new floor joists and leveling out the floor. I'm going to straighten all the walls. It's going to be a pretty tight little room when I'm done.
And is it have a tile shower? Is that part of your plan? What are you doing there?
Yeah, the tile shower, and there I bought the interesting thing there, I believe, is just the tile-ready base that I bought. So that it's completely waterproof, and it's just ready to be set in some concrete, and it's just one and done.
I think we talked a little bit about that the last time you were on, but we should tell folks this is like a molded shower pan that you put tile right on it, and it's got a drain built into the molded piece.
That's right. And what did I want to say about that? Well, it is set in concrete, so it's over the subfloor. You put a decoupling membrane, and you had mentioned about tiling that. In fact, I do need epoxy thin set. So I ordered some, and I have that on hand. So thanks for bringing that to my attention. As usual,
you're not going to thank me when you have to use it.
I know, but as usual, I bought the pan, gutted the bathroom, and then figured out how to use the stuff, right? So, ready, fire, aim.
Well, Colin, I did see the picture you posted, and I can see right down to your crawl space through the joist there. So yes. I hope you got like a lock on the door, or at least a sheet of plywood, so your wife doesn't get up in the middle of the night and think she's going to use the bathroom.
Fall through.
Yeah, I left the door on and covered it with painter's tape, the handle. So you get
there's a clue.
You got a big sticky rude awakening if you reach for the handle.
Rob, you look like you've been busy too. I am totally impressed with the cabinets you bought secondhand for your tool storage. Tell us about those. Those are amazing.
Well, so I had my dad a couple weeks ago come up and help me clean out my shop and sort out all the tools that I've collected over the decades. And now I've just got bins and bins of tools sitting everywhere. And I'm like, it's just going to get to be a mess again if I don't get some kind of place to put these tools. And I've been always looking for, a used set of like mechanics tool cabinets, and people want crazy money.
Stupid money for that.
Even for the used ones. And I opened up Facebook Marketplace, and I didn't even start searching yet, but I was all of a sudden these two like baby blue cabinets popped up, and I'm like, what the heck is that? It was a retiring dentist who these were his cabinets from maybe 30, 40 years ago. And they're the same size and shape as a typical mechanics cabinet with like 8 or 10 drawers each.
Are they made of steel? It looks like
They're
they're
all
wood.
steel, yeah. They're all steel. You know, they're not quite as heavy duty as a mechanics cabinet, but they have these
No, because
beautiful...
dental picks don't weigh like the same as impact sockets, right?
Yeah, but they're made really well. They're on wheels. And they even have like a nice little backsplash to keep your tools from rolling off of them, and these groovy Formica tops on them, and they're just totally unique. Like I love the fact that they're not just the standard red boxes.
And they were $60.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, he was asking $30 for the pair, and he had just posted them 15 minutes prior, and I texted him, and he's like, "Oh, I got some other people interested." I was like, "I'll give you 60." Sold. I just drove straight down there and picked them up. So
great
and
find.
You shared some photographs of a furniture refinishing project. What's that about?
Well, now that I kind of have a makeshift workshop in my basement, I'm actually finally taking on all the little like fun projects that I should have been doing all these years in this house. And my daughter was like, "I need a place to do my homework," and I had this beat up old dark stained pine desk up in there.
It looked like it should have been at the curb, Rob. Can I say that?
Yeah. In fact, Kai, my daughter and I were ready to toss it a few times, but my wife Michelle said, "Give it a chance," and so I started sanding the top, and even with the aggressive rotary sander I had, it wasn't getting all the stain off. So I actually ended up planing the top with my hand power planer, and then sanding it after that, and got it to a nice clean, pine top, and then did a little bit of a red mahogany stain on it, some polyurethane, painted the base to match her trim in her bedroom, and she loves it.
It looks completely different. You did a great job.
Yeah, it's incredible. Nice work.
Do you like that refinishing stuff?
Me? The thing is, I still have not, part of it's probably my basement's just too dirty. I have not, for the life of me, figured out. Sometimes I get no dust in the finish, and sometimes I do, and I can't figure out. I know that's like the common woodworker's dilemma. I don't mind. I actually like doing it. I just need to probably get a cleaner workspace down there and be diligent about keeping the brushes and the finishes clean.
Mm. Well, I might have a couple pieces to bring over to you, buddy.
New business.
Jeff, what have you been doing? You've been, as I understand it, like auto repair guru lately.
Yeah. So I did the other side on the front end of the Explorer, so that's done. At least that phase of it.
I have great sympathy for anyone who works on their own vehicles, but especially for someone who has a rusty vehicle, and that was your challenge, right? You had to cut everything off. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was ugly.
If I was going to be a mechanic, it would be in the Carolinas or Florida, right?
Yeah.
Utah, Texas.
Southern California, or Arizona, probably, yeah.
I don't have anything to report. I don't have anything to report. Nothing's been going on here, but I'm going to work on the stairs again this weekend, maybe hang some drywall and get moving on that again.
Have you given up on it? I know you were talking about trying to get somebody else to build you some stairs, or you.
Oh no, Rob, you haven't been on the show, I guess, in a few weeks. I have the stairs in there, the rough stairs. I need to get finished treads. There are temporary treads on there, and then I need to put flooring on the landings, the winders rather. And last weekend I made a bunch of balusters out of some Doug fir framing lumber that I had left over, and I resawed it to cut out all the knots, and then planed it down to 1.16" square to make the balusters. So cool. I was at the home center the other day and was looking at the manufactured stair parts, that they have in stock. And honestly, the stuff is expensive and ugly. So, I'm going to do it myself, even if it takes a year. I don't need to be in a hurry, right?
Well, if you need any help, I can come by. I'll come by and help you out.
So Saturday, I usually start about 9.
I got the treads for you. I got a whole stack left over from those jobs I used to do in New York City of 3/4 inch thick acrylic. Wouldn't that be awesome to be able to see right down through the stair treads to what's down below?
That doesn't sound slippery and dangerous at all. What were those from stairs, or was that for some other?
They were actually from this giant room we built that was like for kicking soccer balls around in the Nike store in New York City, and the wall, the actual the net was made out of 3/4 inch plexiglass instead of mesh.
So that's only a further indication that Nike has more money than they absolutely know what to do with it, right?
Yeah, there were some fun projects there for sure.
Well, as always, we heard from some listeners, and I always appreciate when you folks write in with your thoughts and comments. This comes from Barbara. Not that Barbara, another Barbara. Dear FHB Podcast, I was so delighted when you featured B's questions on today's podcast. She was trying to decide between 2x6 stud walls and no exterior insulation versus 2x4 stud walls plus exterior insulation. Of course, the podcast has tackled this topic many, many times, so you might be wondering why B's situation made me bend my ear toward the laptop speakers and listen intently. It's because she's in climate zone 2, Houston, I think. So instead of my eyes glazing over for another conversation about insulating a home in New England or Minnesota, finally I can hear discussion on a home that's relevant to me. I live in Sacramento, California, climate zone 4A, hot mixed. Aside from the humidity factor, our insulation needs are very similar. Anyway, just wanted to say thanks for including a discussion about homes I can relate to. You probably know your audience includes a vast number of Californians, Arizonans, and Texans. Thanks for tossing the occasional bone. And bye, Matt. I'll miss you. Loved your intelligent contribution over the years. Well, that is absolutely true, too. So, Barbara, tell your friends who are in Arizona and California and Texas to send in their questions. You know, it's not that we don't want to answer them. We just don't get as many. And maybe that's because, you know, you have to, you know, prime the pump or whatever. And you've done that. So please, all of you, if you're in a hot place, have a question about hot things. If we don't know the answer, we will ask someone who does.
Definitely.
This comes from Ryan in Redondo Beach, California. Ryan has written in many times. Hi, FHB crew. Regarding the question on window condensation from episode 378, I'd highly encourage the person that wrote that question to watch Enrico's recent webinar where he covers this exact topic and tons of other fantastic information. It was hosted by a semi-reputable group of folks, too. Do you want to tell him what that's about, our listeners what that's about, Rob?
So Enrico is from he's from a company called Emu Systems, I think it is, right? They do passive house consulting, and so he's sort of at the top tier of people who understand about building high performance building assemblies. And I haven't. It's been a while since we did that webinar, so I don't remember quite all the details, but it was certainly an awesome presentation.
And the semi-reputable folks Ryan refers to is Fine Homebuilding. So there you go. Hey, gang. It's been a minute since I've written. Sort of surprised you didn't mention the FHB California house. I believe the whole thing was wrapped in mineral wool. Maybe take a breeze through that series for a refresher. So Tim is referring to our exhaustive discussion of exterior insulation, which was a themed episode we had recently. And yes, thanks for that, Tim. I think one of us said, well, what do we know about mineral wool? And none of us remembered that the Fine Homebuilding house actually had it on the exterior, which was kind of embarrassing when Ryan pointed that out to me. But thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, that house, every surface of that house was wrapped in mineral wool and standing seam metal. In fact, I learned, sort of looking back at one of the articles, there's an article called Installing Rock Wool for Continuous Insulation by David Good, who's one of the designers and homeowners in that house. And he mentioned that the roof was covered in top rock DD. And I didn't realize they had a roof surface, a low slope roof surface specific product that rock wool makes.
That's from commercial. They brought that up.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we're seeing a ton in recent years is all of these things that have been involved in commercial and industrial construction that just makes sense moving over to residential. I mean, obviously it makes more sense as we start building more of these modern style homes with low slope roofs. But
that entire build had some things taken from there, because even the deck that was built into the side of the mountain was like they built a deck on a building, like a skyscraper.
You mean like with poured concrete on
Yeah. On
light
that
deck?
corrugated metal. Yeah.
You were on that project a lot, right, Colin? You were out there.
Well, I went out there once. I went out there before they built it and when they finished it, but I was managing the video editing that was coming back to us. So, yeah, very familiar with the house. But
it's a really unique place.
Yeah.
It's what was that, 2019, 2018? I can't remember which one that was. But if you go to the FHB House tab on our website, you can find all the articles about it. So,
do you need to get that?
No.
Our first question comes from... Oh, I hate when I do this. Maybe you guys can figure this out. I'm sorry, whoever wrote this in. I didn't put your name on the script. That's a bonehead move. Hey, gang, I'm starting up a new project in Central Oregon. It's got a polished, radiant heated concrete floor. They're beautiful, but the amount of time and effort it takes to keep that floor from getting scratched and dinged during construction always blows my mind. I'd love to hear y'all discuss pros and cons of different techniques you've used in the past or products I might not have heard of. I've done complete cover protection systems with plastic Tyvek on the bottom and plywood or masonite or ramboard on top. The problem with this method is you always get some dirt under the protection, which ends up grinding into the slab. Also, the slab doesn't breathe if you use something impermeable like plastic, leading to color variation. I've actually had decent success by doing minimal coverage, but then you're relegated to endless hours of sweeping/vacuuming. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Plus, I'm also curious about what you've done to protect large exposed wood columns that are in high traffic areas. Thanks. And so we covered this in Fine Homebuilding, a great article written by Doug Horgan called Job Site Protection, and he goes through the various methods that their company, which works for very high-end clients in the Washington, D.C. area, how they go about protecting these clients' very expensive homes and belongings. And it's a great article. I was very proud to be a part of that. And, those are your answers. I would say that at a minimum, you need to use one of these roll flooring protection products, and they do make them that are vapor open so they don't affect the curing of hardwood floor finishes, or as you say, concrete can change color if it cures at different rates, and that's a problem too, and there's no easy way to fix that. So go there first. Go check out Doug Horgan's article, and we'll put that on the podcast page. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a bit of experience with this kind of stuff from back when I was a carpenter, and the standard thing was always to do just like masonite and tape the seams, but like you said, you always get dirt underneath there. And the one thing in that article by Doug is they talk about this runner material. So it's sort of like a multi-layer approach. They call it the Econo Runner, I think it was called. It's basically like I think it's polyethylene. It's like that foam that you see wrapping around a lot of products that get shipped sometimes, but it's a special roll of it with like a
it's kind
light
of spongy, and it's got a plastic layer that prevents spills from getting through, but it is vapor open, which is the key.
Yeah,
and I think it's self-adhesive.
It is. It's got like a light tack stickiness to it so that you can get it down on you clean the ground really well, put that stuff down, and that way you don't have it grinding dirt, any dust that gets in there into the ground. And then, in a high traffic area, you would still go over that with either masonite or ramboard and tape those seams too.
At least in the traffic areas, right? I mean, you absolutely have to have ways to walk through the spaces that, people with their boots on aren't going to destroy.
Yeah. And a lot of these materials and approaches are similar to like how people deal with stuff when they're shipping, like in trucking and stuff like that. I noticed that in that article, they use those sort of semi-rigid corners that they put around door jambs. And one of the questions in this question, you mentioned wood columns too, is how do you protect those? And I think, again, it's probably a double layer approach. If it's a really delicate surface, wrap it with some kind of foam product first, and then something semi-rigid like a cardboard corner. Or
Sill Seal is a great material that's not too expensive that you can wrap around stuff like that. And I know that's one of the things they use. And then Protective Products, which is like kind of the industry leader in this market, they have all kinds of things that are meant to protect very specific things. And they also sell like these corners you can put on door jams so you don't smash into them when you're carrying things through into the space. It's and I can tell you that if you're working for the right client, This stuff really matters. It really is what is going to get you the job if you can demonstrate that you care about their stuff.
Well, and plus just the fact that if you don't do this, there's a good chance you're going to have to be refinishing something at the end of the job.
At your own expense.
Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned that Protective Products company. Their website is just full of things you'd probably never even heard of for protecting every part of a home you could imagine. I mean, it's, you know, it can be pricey, but it's just sort of part of the process. You know, you got to.
The clients are paying for it. You know, do a good job. That's what I'm saying. What were you going to say, Colin?
I was wondering if you guys are familiar with the other end of it, like living with concrete. Are they more prone to scratching than, let's say, a wood floor? Do you know? Because I know people are always like the wear and tear. Like for me, it's like a natural patina. But there are ways to, you know, they say refinish the floor once a year. You can deal with scratches that are in the sealer by patching it in. But just curious, like livability, what are some of the pros or cons of living with concrete? I know sweeping daily with a Swifter is like an important thing to do.
Yeah, and interestingly, that's one of the photos we have in Doug Horgan's article was like, just because you do this stuff doesn't get you off the hook. You have to keep the floors clean is, you know, every day sometimes, right? You can't let it ride. As far as living with concrete, I don't know. I see it increasingly in commercial spaces, and it's always like super polished. Yeah. I'm sure that gets scuffed up, and they have to redo it annually or, you know, every couple years. What do you know about it, Rob?
I mean, I haven't really experienced it firsthand, but from what I gather, I mean, it really depends on the kind of finish you're going for. Some people do a more just a basic sealer, and some people go with like a full clear epoxy, and there's a lot of other choices in between. So I imagine it really depends on the kind of finish you're going. But we should have people write in and give us their experience. What it's like to live
with a concrete floor. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that appeals to me, but I don't know all about it, right? It could be terrible to live with.
My wife wants one if we ever build a house someday, but the one thing is I have heard, and it's the same thing you experience when you work in a workshop, is walking around, standing, working, especially in kitchens or other high work, you know, task areas. Standing on concrete can be kind of uncomfortable compared to a wood floor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, you have any thoughts on this subject?
Well, just Colin, our friend Ben up in Vermont, he's got a concrete floor in northern Vermont, and he's got some sort of sealer on it, and he scored it so it kind of looks like a tile. But he loves it.
He loves it because it's bulletproof.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you one of my first jobs was refinishing the terrazzo floors every summer from the school district that I went to school. And so they would hire students to do this work where, you know, you run a scrubbing machine with stripper, and you clean the old wax off. And then when you're all done, you know, you refinish it with a new wax finish. I don't know if it's really wax anymore. It's some probably polymer, but they would be just completely trashed with a school year's worth of student foot traffic, right? But boy, they would be beautiful once they were refinished. So I think that's the advantage, right? Is like it can be serviced. It's not ruined, you know?
Right. Nice.
This comes from Mike. Hi there, I'm a builder in Central Oregon and Southeastern Utah. I take a lot of pride in my work and endeavor to use the best building practice when I build a remodel. My wife and I both enjoy listening to your podcast. Recently, my sister had a tract home built in Las Cruces, New Mexico. She moved in September of 2020. Last week, she sent us a series of photos of her tiled floor, which I have included. The photos are truly shocking. The home is built as a slab on grade. My first thought when I saw the photos is that she has movement in her slab. I encouraged her to have someone look for structural issues. Below is the response from the contractor. So he suggested that, you know, that we should first explain that this tile is all lifted and broken. I don't know. I mean, it looks absolutely terrible, right?
It looks like there was an earthquake.
It looks like a wood floor after it's gotten soaking wet. It's not just cracking, it's buckling.
Yeah, tenting, I think, is the phenomenon they call this with regard to tile. And so when Mike asked his sister to challenge the builder on this, the builder wrote back, "We wouldn't cover that as we have not encountered any structural issues. Everything you are experiencing is what other homeowners have experienced. And as we have taken up the tile, we have not found anything wrong with the foundation. The tile soaks up moisture and expands and has nowhere to move except for it to pop up. That is what you are experiencing right now." Well, that's not true because porcelain does not take on water. It is glass. And this is just BS.
So
I'm sorry, I'm getting upset. Someone should take up the conversation before I start foaming at the mouth.
I was trying to do some research to see if maybe Las Cruces had expansive soils and maybe they were having some buckling in the slab, but it doesn't even look like the slab is moving. I don't know. I can't quite tell from the pictures though. But something is seriously wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that if you stripped up the tile, you would not be seeing little fissures through the concrete slab. It really does look like the slab is compromised. However, it does look like, even though you say porcelain doesn't absorb water, it also looks like, wow, that place must have got flooded and everything, like flooded and frozen, you know.
So Mike understands what's going on here mostly, I think. He says, minimally, this could have been prevented by adding an uncoupling membrane like Detra under the tile. What a disaster. The entire house is tiled, so they have to move out and have it repaired. There is a piece of me that feels you get what you pay for. There is no way I could build a house for what they paid. It's so frustrating when even your own family won't listen to you when you explain why they should choose a different builder. Thanks, and looking forward to upcoming podcasts, Mike.
Well, yeah, he mentions decoupling membranes, which are always a great idea with tile, and there are better and better options nowadays than there were in the past. And then also, if you're doing tile throughout an entire house, pretty sure you should be having expansion joints. You shouldn't just run it continuous through the entire house.
That's true.
Absolutely.
I think this is just a bad tile job. You know, like porcelain takes some knowledge to set. Because it doesn't absorb water, it doesn't stick as well as other tiles, and you often have to use additives or back butter individual tiles to get them to stick. And, you know, this is a disaster. I would be really mad. And what I find interesting is what you were experiencing is what other homeowners have experienced. Like, how many? Don't you have any interest in getting this corrected?
Right, as if that somehow makes it right. Yeah. Like, oh, no big. Everybody's tile comes
This
up.
happens all the time.
Yes, so it's your fault.
And what a hassle to move out of your house. What the heck?
Oh, it's very disheartening. And but to his point, like, you get what you pay for. I mean, you know, how much of our business is, hey, I got a bathroom that needs to be done. This guy, he'll do it for $2,500. How do you say no to that? You know, well, you'll know when it's finished.
I'd be interested in seeing the back of the tile.
Like, you don't think there's going to be any mortar stuck to it, right? Yeah, that's my guess.
Huge gap.
And I wondered if they tiled it too quickly after, you know, the concrete was placed, right? Like, yeah. These production builders have like 45 or 60-day build schedules. How the heck is your concrete going to sufficiently cure and shrink if you're setting the tile like, you know, a month later or, you know, 3 weeks later, you know, after the concrete is placed?
Yeah,
it's nuts.
So it might not have a structural issue per se, but it just wasn't the right time to be installed. It wasn't ready to be installed on.
Mike, I wish I had better knowledge, but, you know, without having seen the back of the tile and, you know, like knowing the conditions when it was set and, you know, what materials they used, it's really tough to pinpoint exactly what happened. But I think you know what happened is it's a disaster. Anything else?
Nothing
Sounds
to
like a class action suit to me, but
yeah.
How do you guys get your family to care about like the contractors they're hiring, right? It's like, how do you, if someone who hasn't been around the industry, how do you get them to value, you know, spending 25 or 30% more? I mean, that's a tough sell. I think you'd agree.
It sounds like they need to, it sounds like they need to find out who all these other homeowners are and get together and try to get a group solution here.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
That
Colin, you've had family members cheap out on remodeling projects, right? They hired you.
Yeah, it was pretty cheap. Yeah, you get what you pay for. You want to cut a corner? I'll show you how.
You do good work. That is not true. I just meant that, you're working for free, I'm sure, in many cases, or well below what it would really cost to do the work.
Yeah, hard to know. For friends and family, I just do an hourly rate so that, I'm using my tools and getting a little something for my time, and everybody's happy.
Yeah. I don't know how to get my family to value that stuff, Mike, but everyone in my family, when they hear how much stuff costs when I talk about the, projects I'm covering for the magazine or my own interest, they're like, they just don't believe it. They just like, well, that's impossible. My mom says, well, no one can pay that. I'm like,
yeah.
This comes from Nick. Hi, everyone. I want to say firstly, thank you for all that you do. Your info and knowledge has been an incredible help to me in my air sealing and insulation adventures. I've just barely started on my way towards a net zero house. My quarantine project has been part of my living room where I've learned quite a bit about how badly this kind of work sucks. I'll attach some photos if you'd like to see. Here's my question, or maybe what I'd like to point your attention toward. Not sure if you've seen these for the show or not. He sent a link to sealsprayfoam.com. Seems like a couple of a regular caulk type spray foam, like great stuff, but it comes with a fan spray tip per can. So when you spray it, it actually coats more like a 2-component spray foam insulation. So it's got a fan tip, and it's meant to cover a bigger area than the normal can foam, which is obviously meant to go around the door or window or fill up a crack. But this looks like it's meant to insulate like cavities. Can you comment on what to make of this? This would be a godsend for a DIYer like me who imagines hauling up 2 40-pound canisters into my attic to do some inner circle of hell. Thanks for all you do. Keep up the good work, Nick. Well, Nick, I have no experience with this product, but I can tell you that when I hired a company to do some air sealing work in my basement as part of the Cash for Caulkers program that was part of the stimulus package when the economy tanked in the 2008-2009 period, they used a what looks like a 20-pound propane cylinder like you'd have on your gas grill, and that was 1-component foam. And that seemed pretty cool to me, and it had a hose on it and a little applicator nozzle, but it didn't do what you described, which is like make a fanned spray. So maybe you guys have experience, and if not, we'll ask our listeners to weigh in on this particular product. Go ahead, Rob. Looks like you're chomping at the bit.
I've never actually seen this before, but it basically looks like a similar product to any of the other handheld canned foams, except for the fact that the tip on the gun that they sell has a little barb on it that takes this rubber fan tip. It almost looks like a fan tip you'd see on like a pressure washer. And so it's probably pretty much the same kind of product that you would have in like any other brand of like Great Stuff or something like that. But and I looked at the price, and for those two component kits, like the Versa foam or Tiger foam or any of those things that I think he's what he's talking about, those big 2-can kits that you would use, it ends up being about the same price per board foot. So I guess from a convenience factor, if you're doing really small jobs, it wouldn't hurt to go with something like this, especially if you're crawling around in tight spaces in an attic. I mean, certainly I wouldn't use any of those types of products to do a huge insulation job, like I wouldn't insulate my whole attic with it. Then you're, cost-wise, you're better off probably getting a contractor in there to do a proper 2-part spray job, which certainly going to be more money, but you might be able to get rebates from your state or low interest loans to do something like that. But if you're bent on doing this kind of stuff yourself, I'd say, it's worth a shot to try this stuff for like those tight spots in his cramped attic.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the videotape, right, just to watch it in action, and
so tell us, what is your honest opinion? Does it look like it works?
No, not at all. not even close. It does look like something where, let's say I was doing a repair job where there had been something applied, I would use it to
say you're building a
in.
new house and like someone decides they need to have a light switch or a receptacle. So you have to dig out this foam to run the wire. And then you think it would be like suitable to fix the holes you made?
Well, in that case, it depends. Like the idea here is that it spreads wide, and it actually, as it goes on, it kind of has like a popcorn finish to it. So it doesn't seem very dense. There's a lot of air pockets, and it's going on very thin and doesn't look. So because it's meant to shoot wide, it's more like, let's say a wall was spray foam, and I had to get some wires, so I pulled it out. So now one of the bays had a little section out. Yeah, I'd fill the bay with that. I guess I'd try it, but I was not very impressed with it. However, it may be, I would always get a can and try it out and see, but.
Yeah, it was like 25. It was like $24 a can for a 25 board foot can, and so I mean, I'd say it's certainly worth trying.
But if he's trying to insulate if he's trying to net zero a sizable area and he can get away with the double 20-pound canisters or whatever it is, I think that's the way to go.
I do have some experience with those things. Justin Fink somehow roped me into spray foaming his attic with these various kits. We were doing a trial, and you can cover some ground pretty quick with those. I mean, it contrasts greatly with this. Those will pump out some foam. And yes, the tanks are very unwieldy and miserable to deal with, but what I would suggest is you take the individual tanks up into the attic and then connect the hoses so you're not trying to move this 2 tanks at once with the hoses and everything on it. But that worked really well for me. There are some serious environmental questions with regard to using any of these products. They have some pretty aggressive propellants that are very serious greenhouse gases. So, I mean, ideally, we use these only where we absolutely have to, and try and insulate with some other material, for the good of the planet.
And of course, especially when you're in a tight space like an attic, but really any enclosed space, if you're using these things, you want to be wearing a respirator, you want to be wearing goggles, you want to be wearing gloves,
fresh air respirator,
Tyvek suit, the full protective gear.
If you're curious about the article I mentioned, it's Spray Foam for the Rest of Us by me, and I got 6 or 8 of these different cans and systems and tried them all in the interest of science. And I did find some performance differences, so it's maybe worth checking out. I honestly don't remember what the best one was.
And you looked really good in a Tyvek suit.
Oh my God, that was so awful, Colin. It was so impossibly hot. No one tells you about this stuff is when it's curing, it gives off a ton of heat.
A lot of heat.
So if you're in an attic, right, and this was in the early fall, so it was cooler than it might have been, but oh my God, if you're in an e-wall space like I was spraying this stuff, it gets stupidly hot, just stupidly, dangerously hot. You were a fan, Rob, conversely of cut and cobble, right? That's been your go-to.
I'm not a fan of that. It's just what I've done by default. I hate it. I thought about it. You helped me do my attic a little bit with the drywall, and I had spent weeks doing that stupid cut and cobble. I should have just bought one of those kits, but at the time I was poor and I didn't want to spend.
Yeah, at the time
it was $800 a pop for one of those kits at the time, and they're even more now. And
yeah, the biggest ones I bought or had sent to me were over $600, and I want to say they were 200 board feet kits. Maybe they were 400, but the biggest ones you can buy, and they were definitely approaching between $600 and $700. This comes from George. Dear FHB Podcast, I have a puzzling question for you, and any insight would be great. I moved into a 1946 single-story cape house this May in Buffalo, New York, and have been slowly working on taking out the poorly done drywall patchwork that was done in hopes of repainting. The current color is quite intense red. Even the ceiling is red, and it was very clearly applied over some flaking or deteriorating interior finish. I'm just going to assume that there is lead paint underneath and will cross that bridge when I get there. My question is, what in the heck are these walls? Looking through old penetrations, there are clearly 2 layers of half-inch material. However, it looks like there's no dry. It looks like no drywall I've ever seen. Am I playing with fire here, or is this no big deal? Thanks so much. Hard to say, George.
Yeah, really hard to say.
I'll tell you what my guess would be, though, judging by the age of the house, is that he's looking at the early plaster board substrate that's like a gypsum material and with a rough coat, a scratch coat, and a finish coat over it.
Yep.
So that the first half-inch material is probably similar to drywall, but back in the day it was meant just as a substrate for plaster.
Yeah, it was like a substitute for wood lath, right? It was like way faster to install. It comes in big pieces, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because he drilled a hole in one of the walls, and you can see this like thin white layer on the inside, and then it's kind of a rougher gray layer, and then the thinner white layer on the back. So that kind of adds up to what I would imagine would be the drywall board, the rough coat of plaster, and a finish coat of plaster.
Yep. And I'm assuming that finish coat of plaster is probably what's coming loose that they said these people were trying to paint over prior. I mean,
yeah,
for
it looks
me,
like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about is if you could knock that loose stuff off, it seems like just skimming the walls would be easier than removal.
I'd be tempted to buy a drywall sander and with some dust collection, and if there is lead paint, you have to take further precautions. But
no, I'll go one step easier than that. Just go over it with a 1/4 inch or 3/8 drywall, and you're done.
That was going to be my second suggestion. And the great thing with that is you don't have to take the base trim and the casing off all the doors and windows because you can add this layer because it's so thin. But if the substrate is unsound, you're going to minimum have to level it. And if you're relying on glue to hold it, you're going to have to figure out you can't, right? You can't rely on glue to hold it because it's going to fall down.
So you're saying
screws, I guess, into the framing.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably a combo of, screwed and glued, right? If you're going to do that.
Yeah, and when he said that the stuff looks like it's a mess, like I saw this one picture of the red wall, and it looks like basically there was a smooth coat of plaster, and then someone did a skim coat over that had kind of flaked off because they probably didn't prep that. But I mean, it doesn't look like crumbly or anything like that. It just looks like
rough. It just looks
like
bad.
someone just made a mess out of it. Yeah. So I mean, you might be able to, but yeah, if you start digging into that stuff, then you got to worry about lead safe work. But if you go over it, it's going to be a lot less of an environmental concern, health concern.
I think I would skim it as long as I felt that it wasn't flaky.
Would you use the products we've talked about in the past on the show, Colin? These scrims that are meant to, strengthen a crumbling plaster wall, or would you just go right over the existing substrate?
Well, in this case, I mean, judging from the picture I'm looking at, it's got a solid coat of paint, and although the surface is very pocked, it doesn't look crumbly or falling off. So I would just start slapping drywall compound on there.
Do you think that it's going to stick, though? This paint looked pretty glossy to me. Is there a risk that the plastery material is not going to stick to this glossy finish?
I suppose that is a possibility, but, it does look kind of almost like it's got a concrete porous surface that was painted. Like there is character to it. It doesn't look... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that other than I'd try it.
Maybe a trial area is in order, right? Like in the closet.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of time, the difference between, gluing drywall up there and then taping it versus skimming is kind of where I'm at,
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Now, that scrim stuff you're talking about, is that a thick material or like a primer? It's like a glue.
A fabric. It's a non-woven.
I know what you're talking about.
What is it, Jeff?
Fiberfuse.
Fiberfuse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they make it comes in 5-foot rolls, I believe, and it's meant to fix your crumbling plaster. We've talked about it several times.
It's the same stuff, is it not? That's the new tape, right?
Yes.
Right.
Except it's in a big roll.
Right. That stuff is so great to work with. I don't know if you've worked with that stuff. It's incredible. It changed tape.
I don't know, George. I think you could overthink this one. I would say try some stuff and see what works. none of us on this podcast are going to give you a definitive answer that's guaranteed to work because we don't know what we're dealing with. But I think you got to do some science. You got to do some trials. You got to do a tape test. Put some drywall compound there, let it dry, sand it up, and then put some tape on it, burnish it, and then pull it off and see if it sticks. That's what they do in the paint industry, right?
It's a good idea. Yeah, I like it.
What do you think, Rob? You're a man of science.
Yeah, and if he does that, take some pictures, and we'll put a blog post about it on the website.
Backyard tape test 3. What I'm referring to, for the folks who aren't familiar, is Martin Holliday, our friend, has done 2 versions of the backyard tape test where he puts these flashing tapes on various materials and lets them sit on his shed for years or decades, and then evaluates how they've held up and their adhesion. And some of this stuff is pretty impressive. Years on, it's still working. And this stuff is really not made to be left exposed, but some of it's pretty tough.
Yeah, I think the first one he did was about 10 years ago on Green Building Advisor, and he just kind of put some plywood and some foam and some other typical building materials on his shed in his backyard, and put every kind of flashing tape known to man on there. And it was really insightful because there were a bunch of flashing tapes. So it was clearly this is the one you want to use if you're sticking it to this material or this material. And in fact, that's when we had an extra roll of that Sega Wig Glove tape lying around the office. And when I first started doing the polyethylene sheeting in my basement, that was the best one to stick to polyethylene. I'm taking that. I used that on part of the basement's waterproofing system in my house. So
did it work, Rob?
Yeah, it works great. Years later,
it's tough to get things to stick to poly, and that does, huh?
Yeah, you can buy this special red polyethylene tape that they use for. I guess it's really made for that purpose, but at the time I couldn't track anything down that really worked, and that stuff works great. I've got some of it exposed in my basement still, and it's tight.
I can tell you right now, our Canadian listeners are screaming at their devices because they're very familiar with the red tape you're talking about. They call it tuck tape, and Canadians use polyethylene as their air barrier, by code, and they have enclosures around their electrical boxes, and they detail it with great precision and use it to air seal their houses, which I think is kind of interesting.
Right.
What were you going to say about poly, Colin?
Oh, I didn't really have any commentary other than it's really hard to find tape to stick to it, and spray foam doesn't stick to it either. So if you're trying to spray foam something and you first put up poly, your spray foam will slide off the wall.
Now that sounds like the voice of experience.
Well, I won't out one of our beloved architects who found out the hard way and had to quick improvise, and I think they went out and got chicken wire and pushed it up against the wall so they could continue spraying, to give it something to hang on to.
Wow. So it just falls right off of it as you're spraying? Interesting.
It just doesn't hold, so it slides down and gets clumpy, I guess. I wasn't there for it, but I've heard about it.
Well, you gotta learn the hard way sometimes.
Yeah, if you're gonna be on the cutting edge of building,
some stuff's not gonna work, right?
Yeah.
Okay, agreed. I don't know if that was helpful, George, but so in this period of time, they were trying all kinds of plaster things in an effort to get housing construction ramped up, and all these systems were tried. And the other thing you see is in this period is button board, which is kind of a gypsum product like Rob was talking about. It's got a bunch of holes in it, and it's meant to key in the plaster. The plaster actually oozes through it, and it makes these little round patterns on the backside, which is why people call it button board. But I've seen this stuff that looks like Celotex, kind of this brown fibrous material used behind plaster in homes of this vintage and in the subsequent decade. And I don't know. I wouldn't worry about it. It's fine, I'm sure, unless it's asbestos, and then worry about it.
If it's not falling off the wall, I'm thinking that one of the options we were talking about is probably the way to go.
What were we talking about?
To your point about will the compound stick to it, I wonder if a bonding agent, like a primer that's sort of like a bonding, seal it and make it accept the new product. That might be a good way to go.
Well, I'm going to appeal to our listeners, as I often do, for help with this. You know, how do you get rough plaster that's bad finish but otherwise sound? What do you do with it? It's, you know, I think that's a good question, and so many of us folks with older homes, this is something we have to deal with. I can tell you, George, your walls need some help, and the color is really, really, really something.
I bet you Ben Moore can,
help
match that so he can get back to his original TV.
Oh, that was bad. I don't know. It seemed like someone had The Shining, inspiration maybe. Red room. Do you guys have anything to add before we close shop today?
Just one quick thing. As usual, we're chipping away at new project guides, and we will have a siding and exterior trim one live, possibly by the time people hear this episode.
Nice.
What's that about, Rob?
Siding and exterior trim.
That's cool. And you continue to roll these things out. What's after siding and exterior trim? Do you know?
I think we're going to have a kitchen design one, and we're going to be moving on to plumbing, and then interior trim. We got a whole list going.
And I would remind listeners that you get access to all of this fantastic archived and curated content with a all-access subscription to finehomebuilding.com. Do you have anything to mention, Colin?
Well, only in that I rented a 20-pound demo hammer when I was removing the tile.
I bet that was fun.
It was. And we've talked about the demo hammers on the podcast before, and I've borrowed yours. You know, that long one? I have one similar to that, but I have I have like a knockoff version. It just was not cutting it. And I was like, I really need something. I went to Home Depot. That 20-pound demo hammer was amazing.
So can I guess that you were trying to break up the mud bed in your bathroom? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, I had thin set the tiles to plywood with no uncoupling membrane.
Yeah.
So uncoupling it was very difficult.
So you clearly did a good job adhering the tile. It worked.
I also put a layer of 3/4-inch plywood over the old subfloor, and I screwed like every 3 or 4 inches. So what a nightmare undoing the work I did. It was, I mean, a 5x8 bathroom, pulling up that floor, it was incredible.
You know, that's the one of the things when I was working in remodeling, some of the companies I worked for, some of the people I worked for were like, you know, we love using these screws to hold everything together, but whoever has to take this thing apart is going to hate us.
It was rough.
And you can't just undo the screws because then the screw heads are all full of thin set, right?
You can't even find them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to know. So what would you tell folks to do who didn't want this hassle?
I don't know. I still think it's great to use screws. They're just going to be cursing us.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, there's a lot of things we do where when it comes to remodeling, it's going to be difficult. You know, anytime you glue down a floor, now the floor is stuck to the subfloor.
Right.
Well, then we just come up with better tools for demolition, right? Like those steel demon blades that Diablo makes for cutting through anything that has metal in it, you know? So you get above those joists from your crawl space and just cut those screws right clean off the joists.
I can tell you that Steel Demon product line, and they make recip blades that are carbide tipped, and they make circular saw blades of different sizes. Those things are fantastic. They
work
cut
really well. Really well.
Wow.
Like magic. Like I can't imagine. I've never knew about them before, and they're just amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And they last.
That company the company sent me recently a carbide tip metal cutting recip blade and 100 other bimetal ordinary blades, and they claim that they're equivalent. And when you first see the price of these things, you choke, right? Because who wants to pay $30 for a recip saw blade, right? But oh my God, they just work so good and last forever. And they cut things that recip blades are not really good at cutting, like cast iron and stainless steel, and it just works.
Yeah, absolutely. You gave me one of those, and it's been on my Sawzall. Like, it just hasn't come off. It's there, and it always works. And I look at it, I'm like, this isn't going to cut anything. It's fine. You know?
And, I get why those things are so expensive. I've seen them manufactured, and the way they're made is so, like, recip saw blades, like, come on a roll of like steel. They first like put the notches on the rolled steel, the coiled steel, and then like they feed this this recip blank into a welder, and each one of those carbide teeth has to be welded on the blade individually, and then the sides are ground to make it sharp. But compared to the ordinary production process for a recip blade, these are way harder to make, and that's why they're so expensive. But God, they work.
Yeah, they work. So, okay.
I want to make an appeal to our listeners for suggestions for Pro Talk guests. I've gotten some great feedback from folks who listen to the show. They really enjoyed Mike Patterson's conversation with me, and some other of the crusty builders especially. We love to hear from. So if you have any suggestions for those kind of folks who have been in the industry for a long time and have lessons for the rest of us, I would love to know about them, and I'd be eternally grateful for your help with that. And other tradespeople too. Like, we haven't had an electrician on the show. We've only had one plumber. We've had low voltage people, but only 2. So like, I would love to have the whole industry represented regularly, and I think that would make for a really interesting show. Do you guys have any suggestions of someone I should talk to?
Nah.
Not off the top of my head. We talked earlier.
Not when you put me on the spot. I'll come up with a list.
All right. Well, so it's great when you mention them by name, because then they feel obligated to do it. So if you think of someone next time, we'll bring it up.
Okay.
All right.
I'll have my list ready.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Colin, and Rob for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us. No matter how you're listening, it helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.